Welcome to the Alphagenix Podcast, where every week we talk to incredible guests from around the world of biohacking, well-being, men's health, and more. Here's your host, co-founder of Alphagenix, Ross Tompkins.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome today's guest, Dr. Alex Pardhy from Alchemy with Alex. Alex, we met earlier in the year at the Health Optimization Summit. I've been following you on Instagram ever since, but welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So I love all the content you put out, and I think it's going to be a really fascinating conversation. But for people who don't know who you are yet, who is Dr. Alex Pardhy?
Gosh, what a question. Dr. Alex Pardhy is, well, I'm an ex-medical doctor, and I'm now working in the field of personal transformation, mainly for systems change thinkers and leaders who are looking through their own personal deep diving and development to create the new systems that we're going to have to move towards as a species if we want to move through this next 100 years without extincting ourselves. And so I do that with a range of tools, psychedelics, shamanic healing work, and straight up accountability through coaching, to provide a really high-level container for people to go really deep. And I have a deep passion for indigenous wisdom. I've personally found that my own shift from a very reductionist Western mindset of, you know, show me the science or you're just talking nonsense, into a much more open experience of the world around us, which is far more complex than that. And that has really been a shift that I've experienced through spending times with indigenous wisdom keepers, sat many times with various tribes in different countries all over the world. And personally, I'm now working with an indigenous Mazatec woman who works with mushrooms in a very traditional, ancient way. The Mazatec of Oaxaca in South Mexico worked with these medicines. And so, yes, I have a deep belief that the indigenous mindset is going to help shift humanity towards a life-giving future for all. And so my work is really supporting people to connect to that as well. And from there, come back to modernity with new values, new experiences that they can start to implement into the systems we've created. And that's, I don't know if that's me, but that's my work.
I love that. Yeah. So at what point was there a moment then when you went from traditional, as you say, reductionist, allopathic medicine, here's a sticker to stick on your broken leg, to spiritual healing? Like, because I'm sure there will be some people watching going, well, they're totally different things. How can you possibly integrate them? So was it a slow progress or slow process, or was there a thing that happened, a catalyst where you went, oh, hang on a minute, there's something else I'm missing here?
It was a sudden and a slow process. So the sudden catalyst was ayahuasca, which even after years of taking mushrooms in a recreational format, I'd had magical experiences, but I wouldn't say they were transformational. Mm-hmm. And then ayahuasca kept finding me at the end of 2012, at the end of the Mayan calendar, which was meant to be the end of the world, according to some people. And it was the end of my world as I had known it. And it was this deep understanding that energy is real, the power of intention is real, that we can affect change in other realms, other layers of we have the physical body, and then we have energy bodies, and all of these are creating the physical body simultaneously. And the physical impacts the energetic, but they are in a dance. And so once I'd had a direct experience of that, then, and I still to this day would say I do wrestle with it practically. Like you said, these two blueprints don't sit that easily on top of one another. And that's the paradox of the great mystery, which is what I call the feminine aspect of all phenomena. And great spirit is the masculine. So there's great mystery, and then there's great spirit. And we always want to put these beautiful structures on top of everything, but the feminine principle, the chaos, the mystery will always say, well, nice try, and kind of laugh in your face. And yeah, so after the ayahuasca ceremony, really it was years of experiencing various things. I went and I trained in Kambo, which was a frog medicine from the Amazon jungle. And that I trained in, again, it found me in London. This was back in 2015. And I actually decided to train in it because of my impending sense of what's coming and the concept of a post-antibiotic era, like a place where we need substances because we have multiple drug-resistant bacterial strains, or because hospitals aren't working, all these kinds of things from systems breakdown. And I thought, what could I have in my toolkit, my arsenal, to treat bacterial infections? Because everyone who's ever had a root canal will know that it's the worst thing you've ever experienced in your life. And I thought, oh my God, imagine not having antibiotics. And so Kambo, I really came at from a very left brain perspective of, this is a biologically active protein peptide within the secretion of this frog from the jungle. And I want to make sure I have that to hand. There was nothing spiritual about that when I decided that. However, through practicing as a facilitator for other people through Kambo and diving deeper into things like tantric massage and energy work, I was like, okay, something else is going on here. And that naturally just became a progression over 4 years. And for those 4 years, I was working in the ER and then running Kambo ceremonies. So I was doing, and the ER, to any American English listeners, A&E. We have different emergency services names, but essentially emergency medicine. And I was known as the crazy frog lady by my doctor friends, and I was known as the, oh my God, you're a doctor, by all the hippie people. And it was quite a funny time of bridging two worlds. And then finally, I just realized that medicine wasn't supporting me as a individual, regardless of my thought processes, and decided to leave and trained in health coaching. But like I said, still to this day, it is sometimes hard to reconcile, Ross. It's not a simple thing when we've been conditioned from such a long time to believe that physical phenomena is it.
Yeah, as you say, we're in this reductionist world where A equals B, when actually there's a whole other universe out there of things that interplay and work with us all the time. But excuse me, I guess there'll be some people watching that don't know what ayahuasca is or don't know what Kambo is. So would you mind, I guess, exploring that a little bit? So what is ayahuasca? How did that change things? And what does Kambo, how does it work? Are they the same? Do they have overlap?
Yeah, absolutely. So ayahuasca is a vine from the Amazonian jungle, though it grows all around the world. It's been grown in Hawaii. It grows in tropical climates, essentially. And it takes a long time for it to mature, for it to be ready to be used. And essentially, you then combine it with the chacruna leaf, which, so between the two, a bush and a vine, you boil them up together for like a day or so with sometimes loads of other different plants. And it creates this DMT containing, and DMT is one of the most potent psychedelics on the planet. It's what we release when we die in our bodies. And it essentially takes you on a psychedelic journey. So a visionary journey where you're having hallucinations. Hallucinations different to a vision, and we could discuss the semantics there. But essentially, you perceive things in a way that you haven't before. You can see things from very different perspectives, and you might be visited by a certain energies or entities that can teach you things. And there's a feeling of being held by the energy of this plant as it teaches you things. And that's very hard to understand if you've never done it. And I myself was very resistant to the concept that a plant had any kind of consciousness or could teach me anything. And I very humbly now bow before that plant and say, I'm sorry. And then that takes, so traditionally you will drink 2 or 3 cups of ayahuasca through a night. The ceremonies were often held at night by the Shipibo tribes of the Amazon jungle, although many other tribes work with it, and some Brazilian tribes work with it through the day. And the Shipibo Peruvian. So it really depends who you sit with. But the way that the format has been brought to the West is that you would drink throughout the night. You normally start around 10, have a few cups. And And yes, you just go a little bit deeper each time. And it is important to say it's completely illegal right now in the UK and in many other countries. And yeah, I won't go deeper into that, but it is, yes, this is not to say I'm recommending everyone takes it or that it's, especially if it's illegal. However, in my personal experience, I have. And that really was my first direct experience of energy is real. And yeah, there's an intelligence to life that is also, I'm in a dialogue with life. It's not me, egocentric Alex, who's affecting change on life. Life and I are in this dialogue, and I can communicate with life if I choose to. And so that was a big realization.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kambo itself is a frog secretion from all through the Amazon basin. This frog lives. It's a very big frog. It can get to 12 inches big.
Wow.
And it's called the Phylomedusa bicolor is the Latin name. And when I first heard about Kambo when I was in the jungle, I didn't personally want anything else in my system. I was just like, yeah, ayahuasca's enough, thanks. I've got enough here to deal with. And it wasn't until I got back to London that someone mentioned it, and I looked into it. And on all the doctors, when you do your literature reviews of different medical concepts, you go onto PubMed, which is the database. Anyone can access it. It's all the medical publications that have ever been published. And I went onto PubMed and I typed in the Latin name of the frog and a whole list of all the different secretions that, all the different peptides, all the active compounds within the secretion that the frog gives when it's its defense secretion. And because if an animal were to pick it up and it secreted it, then the animal would very quickly have an increased heart rate, drop in blood pressure, start vomiting, and be completely incapacitated. And so when you apply that to a human through tiny burn marks in the skin, which hurt less than a scratch, to be quite honest, your body sucks it up, the lymphatic system sucks it up. And then you have an hour-long purgative process, which is not fun at all. Feels like you just had a very acute experience of diarrhea and vomiting. Diarrhea is not guaranteed, vomiting is. And you have to drink a lot of water and you purge and vomit. And then at the end of it, you generally feel amazingly wonderful. And it's a bit counterintuitive to the West, who don't really believe that vomiting is a good thing. We do all kinds of things to limit vomiting. But if you look at dogs who chew grass, or loads of other cultures do have a form of anticipated purge where we can clear things out from the system, we can reset the gut, we can release something energetically. And it's been used by many cultures throughout the world. And so this frog is a very, I would say, powerful and quite aggressive way of doing that. And it's something that I think it is possible to overdo. So that's something to be aware of, but it's not it's psychoactive. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it does attach to things like delta opioid receptors, which can explain its analgesic effects. It's very good for pain reduction. But it doesn't have, I wouldn't say it's anything like ayahuasca at all. They're like polar opposites. Ayahuasca, although it can help you start to feel into the somatics of your body experience, you're not going to have any like contractions that are going to make you vomit, although you will vomit probably at some point. But no, Kambo it's completely different and not psychedelic.
A lot more physical than spiritual.
It can be quite spiritual at the end. It's almost, one of my colleagues who trained with me in 2015, his Kambo name on the way he markets, because you can legally take Kambo in the UK, is Kambo Clarity. And it has this way, my feeling of it is it just creates a lot of spaciousness. It really reinforces your own energy. It kind of pushes off anything that's not yours. And that's what the Brazilians believe it does. They call it panema, this feeling of depression or heaviness, like a black cloud is around you, and kind of how depression is often depicted artistically. And it sort of pushes it off, and you come back to this central place, which, it's really very clarifying.
I love that. And so what then took you from, so ayahuasca, went to Kambo, and you were still transitioning, as you say, you were known as the crazy frog lady on one hand, and the, oh my God, you're a doctor on the other. And then now we're talking about mushrooms. So where and when did that transition happen, and how does it fit in?
Mushrooms came along in about 2016 and 2017. I started having some very strange experiences with mushrooms, where I would take them and I would be with people who had taken them, and then certain things just started happening, which led to unintentional healings and even purging. Like some people it felt like I was channeling something, and I still am resistant to that word, but it felt like this old lady would come through me and I would touch people's bodies. Like someone was like, "Oh, I hear you're a healer. Can you like fix my headache or something?" And I'd touch them. They'd like, after 10 minutes, I'd start saying things that I was like, "I'm not really sure why I'm saying this." And then they would vomit, and then it would be like, "What just happened?" And then it was like I took something out of them, but it wasn't me. It was something else. And this happened twice one summer. And I was like, what the, I'm not going to swear, bleep is going on? Because at that point, it wasn't really anything I knew about. I hadn't done any healing training. I was just holding Kambo ceremonies. And so it wasn't something I understood. And so that took me to study mushroom shamanism. I was like, what just happened? I spoke to like a shaman, and she was like, seems like you've taken something out of someone, but don't do that unless you know what you're doing. And I was like, okay, I'll try not to. How do I figure out what I'm doing then? And so it was this kind of chicken and egg situation where something happened and I had to follow the thread. And so, yeah, I went to Mexico, where I discovered there was not a completely unbroken lineage of mushroom shamanism and healing, but an ongoing culture of it that had adopted the more Spanish culture as it had to when the conquistadores came in the 1600s and basically took over their culture. So there was still in Oaxaca, in North Oaxaca, curanderas and curanderos, which is the name for healers in Mexican, in Spanish. And they were still practicing their rituals with mushrooms. And so I went there and I started trying to learn and understand what was going on. And honestly, I felt like I'd found more questions than answers. And it wasn't until I started doing shamanic training from, I think, 2020 and 21, for the 2 years I was engaged in 2 separate years of shamanic training, that things started to make more sense. And at the same time, I also met another curandera, who is called Alejandrina Pedro Castaneda, who's a Mazatec woman from North Oaxaca who works with the mushrooms. And then we started creating a friendship and a bond, and are going to start working together in various ways, which I'll share later. But yeah, it was a long journey of confusion. And yes, and I'm feeling a lot more grounded in my understanding of the energetics at play. However, it is still all a mystery, you know? It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's fun trying to work that mystery out, though.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of your journey then. And now you have Alchemy with Alex. So what is Alchemy with Alex?
Alchemy with Alex is really the umbrella through which I share everything that I do, be that inspirational thoughts, education around the topics I'm discussing now, sharing about Indigenous wisdom, and how to support those beings out there still maintaining beautiful knowledge that the West just has no idea about in terms of healing. And it's really where I shine my light, so that people who can be supported by the kind of things I have personally been supported by can learn more and discover. And I will share that before I sat with ayahuasca, I was really not a very nice person. A really horrible person. Yeah. And it was really shocking, some of the revelations about myself that I had in that first ever journey. And it was, it's been a deep, ongoing integration process. What does it mean to be a good human? What does it mean to have compassion? What does it mean to care for other people when we're having our own experience and our own hurt and our own pain and our own trials and tribulations? And before ayahuasca, I wasn't doing a very good job of being a nice human. And yeah, nowadays, a lot of my friends would say I've changed a great deal. Yeah.
For the better.
I'd like to think so. And so I can only share what I've been through, and that's what I share on my page. And everything I do really is through Instagram, the Alchemy with Alex page. But essentially, alchemy is transformation. It is the transformation of one substance into another. And there are various stages and states of transformation in the concept of alchemy, as it goes back a long way for true alchemists. And I won't pretend that I'm an alchemist in a chemical sense, but more in an inner, energetic and personal experience. For example, if you're experiencing a lot of pain and heaviness and blocks and stagnation, or even if you're high functioning, and some people who are high functioning, they've still got their shit. And I think that's a big mistake we make, that one day when I have the money, one day when I have the nice house, one day when I have the perfect partner, I'm going to be happy. And it's like none of the outside provides that. And so it's supporting people through these moments of realization where they go, that's not it. Oh my God, what is it? I don't know. And we fall into potentially an existential crisis or a depression or an anxiety. And that's what we alchemize through the work.
Love that. Yeah. I've got one of the tattoos I've got is the Philosopher's Stone. So alchemy. It's a big Love that whole concept. Why do you think there is such a resistance from many people in the West to kind of acknowledge that there might be more out there, that we don't know it all? Why do we feel like we have to stick everything in a container? Do you have any thoughts on that? Maybe
there's two. One is that it's just what we've known. It's what we've been conditioned to believe, and if you've spent the first 7, but definitely even up to 18 years of your formative life experiencing one reality, then what reason do you have to believe that there is anything else? The irony of that is that most of us as children did have magical experiences. We just forgot, very much like the Peter Pan story. We did. We spoke to fairies, we spoke to animals, we spoke to the world in this uninhibited way. And we were very connected to the world and to spirit, if you want to call it that, but I would call it the mystery. And so when we forget that, and then we go into the schooling system and this, that, X, Y, very linear concept of how reality exists, then why would you believe it? Number one. Number two, which I think is one of the major things, is control. Most people have a lot of fear operating in their system, and they want to be able to control outcomes and control reality. And when we operate to a paradigm where 1 + 2 = 3, then we think we can control it more, because there is some objective sense that we can cling to about how the universe works. And I think people are very afraid of losing control.
I get that. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really, so it's almost a subconscious decision that people have made because of how they were brought up, but it feels comforting to think that we're in control, I guess. And I guess it feels quite scary to think, well, maybe I can't control others, don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, completely. And the irony is, even if you're not into spiritual stuff, like even as a Buddhist philosopher, because Buddhism is not a religion, it's just a philosophy that you get to go and apply and see if it works for you. Buddhist philosophy, the first thing is like meditate on the 1,000 ways you can die. And it's like, oh yeah, I could die at any moment. Like my body could generate disease and I'm not in charge of that. It's just, there it is. Or I could, someone could career off a road and hit me, a bus could hit me and I could die. And it's like, wow, like there is so little control over what truly happens. And yes, we can control, we can exert effects on our environment. However, at the end of the day, like some of the major aspects of our lives, we can't control.
It's interesting what you said there. So our body might create disease. Do you feel from the experiences that you've had so far that we can influence that and we can heal ourselves?
I believe so much of disease is stress in the system. And I also do believe in genetics as a doctor. I do believe if you have a familial adenomatous polyposis, for example, gene, which is a polyp creating bowel condition where many of these polyps go on to become cancerous. Like I do see the correlation of people who have those genes going on to create that illness in their bodies. And so this is the part where I call myself a world bridger. It's like just as much as energetics and intention create form, form can also affect all phenomena. So some people say in the spiritual and healing scene that everything is energy, everything is intention. But I think that that's putting too much onus on ourselves. I think it can create a lot of shame. You know, you'll have a lot of spiritual people going around saying, like, if you take 100% responsibility, how did you create this disease? How did you manifest this disease? And I think that's a bit shaming at the end of the day. It also means that you think you understand how reality works. And it's like, yeah, I don't believe that. I believe that we can, through certain stress management processes, through certain dialoguing with transhuman entities, I'm going to call them, beings, we can work to undo physical disease. However, I think sometimes it's not your path to have that happen. And why? But it's not necessarily always the case, because if it was always the case, then you would be able to 100% heal everything every time. Even the best healers know that that's not possible. And so there's a trusting of the mystery. Again, it's like, it wasn't your path to heal that. Yeah.
Do you think that could be a block in the healer? Like to think that not everything can be healed. Do you know what, in that question, in that statement itself, maybe there's another level, like, well, actually, why not? If anything is possible, could that be possible?
It could be possible. It's an interesting one. I'd be really curious if there's a healer out there who has 100%. I've never heard of anyone who has 100% healing rate. If they exist, like, please, listeners, do send them, contact us and let us know. Yeah. Yes, I hear what you're saying. So much of healing is based in the healer's belief that their guides are capable of doing this healing work, that whatever they are channeling is capable of doing the healing work. And belief and intent is such a massive part of it. There was something else that was coming through that I wanted to share. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, it's disappeared out of my head.
It'll come back at the right time. When someone comes to you and maybe they're resistant, maybe they've come because they've been told to come, or they've said you should go and chat to Alex or a healer, how much time do you spend winning them over, I guess? Because unless they believe in what they're going to do, it won't work anyway, will it?
No, not necessarily. There's plenty.
It's effective.
There's plenty of people who have been healed and they're very, 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 like, they don't believe it at all. They're like, okay, this is my last option. And often with shamanic practice, you get a lot of people who come and they're just like, this is the last resort. That's why they end up at your door. And they're super skeptical. I don't spend any time winning anyone over. And I have done that before for years. And it is just the biggest waste of my energy and time. I'm happy to treat a skeptical person, but I'm not going to take time to win them over.
Yeah, I love that. My wife is the most skeptical person in the world, and I have a grounding bracelet that I wear usually when I'm on the computer a lot. And she was like, "Oh my God!" But the first time she wore it, she was like, "Wow, that feels amazing. I can feel myself calmer." I have this, around my neck. I have this sound healing device, and again, it was like, "Oh, what have you bought now, Ross? It's a load of rubbish." And then she used it, and she was like, "Flipping heck, I can feel that." So it's great. I have this like barometer, like living with me the whole time. This perfect skepticism, and sometimes she does something, and she's like, "Wow, okay, yeah, I can feel that." So it's a good barometer for me, I think.
I mean, I was the skeptical person, so I can't judge that person. And even after ayahuasca, like I said, like when I first found my first shamanic teacher, I got on her couch and she was like, right, I want you to talk. I want your leg to talk to me. I want, like, she would hold my leg and go, right, and move the leg and just feel like, where is it tight? Where is it constricted? And then she compared the left and the right leg and the left arm and the right arm. And we just together observed like what my body was doing. Then she did the healing practice. And afterwards she tested them again and they were completely way more balanced. And it was really fascinating to witness. But she asked me to speak to her from my right leg. And my left brain is still very strong. And I was like, this is still like 2019, and I couldn't really do it. I was like, this feels stupid, and that doesn't mean that that's not going to work. And so, like, I honor the skeptical people. I say, great, bring your skepticism. We'll honor it. Great. It's a part of you. And in shadow work, we would call that the magician. We have to get the magician on board. We just say, thank you. You have every right to be skeptical. Take a seat, witness what happens. Nothing's lost by the end of this if nothing happens. And that's when the rest of the internal psyche or the internal family systems, if you're talking from an IFS psychological perspective, that's when all the other ones can start to come up and actually things can happen because we honor the skeptic.
Yeah, I love that. The first time I did a past life regression, my left brain was firing off so hard. Like, do not say that, Ross. You cannot say that. That makes no sense. The person I was working with was going, no, tell me what can you see? What are you experiencing? And I was going, no, that can't be right. There's something going on. It's fascinating. It was like this little war going on inside my own brain. Super interesting. And I guess that will always happen. We just get better at listening or trusting, I guess, those messages.
Completely. And there's certain practices as well. There's certain practices as well that really allow one to experience, because that's the left brain. And then we have the right brain. And it's not the same in everyone. Left-handed people, sometimes their right brain, left brain switched around. So any left-handers out there, don't feel left out. But right brain activities, like dance, like writing poetry, meditation is something we can do every single day that is going to support us to be able to access a right brain state, because it's a continual surrender. Because the left brain wants to grab hold of something and make sense of it and do it. And the right brain wants to sit back and allow something to emerge. And that's what we need to facilitate as we let go of thoughts in meditation. We're allowing spaces for things to emerge, consciousness from outside ourselves or within ourselves, but deeper places within, to come into our conscious mind. And so I would say if you do want to start to attune to those kinds of places, then take up meditation.
And what about for those people that perhaps have tried and they've sat there and the brain just doesn't quiet down? I hear that all of the time. Any advice for those people who might be watching?
100%. I can and also empathize again. I think that's why I love my work, because I just empathize with everyone. It's like, this is a hard journey, guys. It takes time. Do something physical before you sit down to meditate, even if it's just 20 press-ups and like 10 star jumps, whatever. Just get your heart rate going so that you can switch from your like continual monkey mind before you sit down. I'd also recommend then doing at least 6 rounds, is what's been scientifically shown, 6 rounds of the in for 4 and out for 6 breath. So you're tapping into the vagus nerve by exhaling for longer than you inhale. So I do your little star jumps, run up and down, whatever, sit down, in for 4, out for 6. Even once you're just like, oh, okay. So do that 6 times and then start meditating. That should really help. And then the only other thing I would suggest is maybe actually taking yourself off on a long weekend retreat. There's some incredible ones that run. There's a really beautiful one in Devon called The Barn, which is just, I went there earlier this summer, and can do these kind of partial silence through the day, but not fully silent retreats where there's meditation points for a few times a day. And you'll find over the course of a weekend that actually by the end of the weekend, you've disengaged from your normal life for long enough to allow the silence to start to come in. And it's almost like once you've experienced it once, it's something you can tap into more. Yeah.
Love that. That sounds really interesting. And what type of things do you offer then? So you mentioned there's coaching and there's, I think, retreats as well. So do you want to talk us through a few of those options?
Yeah, I offer one-on-one. I never call it really coaching or shamanic healing work. I call it mentorship because it's not straight anything. It's a mixture of everything. And I like to do 1 month with some people who are just like, I want 3 or 4 calls in the course of a month to radically make a habit shift or a transformation in that space of time, or they come to me in crisis. And so, we get on a call and discuss what is happening in their life right now and create a very clear plan. And I give them a lot of homework and they go away and get to do that. And then other options then include 4, 6, or 8 month mentorship packages, which really we just go deep. And often a lot of my clients want to microdose. And that can really help as well when we're talking meditation. And microdosing is well known to decrease the ruminative mind, decrease this kind of monkey mind that is always there and allows us to get focused and present. But it also gives us motivation when life can seem very heavy. And a lot of people come to me and they're almost verging on depression and even I myself was in this space in June because there was something not connecting about how I was living life and what I wanted to create and certain things. And so I'm not saying that it's when life wants you to start to do something differently and you're not listening or you're not able to understand what that step is, then working with these medicines in a very subtle way as well over a period of time can help pull us up out of that rumination and allow us to see a next step. And so a lot of my clients, we work with that alongside the coaching. And then sometimes they do immersions with me. And I often hold these immersions in countries where the medicines are legal. So I would go to Amsterdam or Mexico. Mexico is still a bit of a gray area, but no one really cares. Nothing like England or Costa Rica and all these countries. And so we can go and work in a safe way with these medicines. And then I would offer them the option of Cambo, which not everyone takes. And that's fair enough. I never push these medicines on anyone who doesn't want them. And then the mushrooms and some shamanic healing work, not together, different times. I believe that when people sit with the mushrooms, them and the mushrooms know what to do. I just hold the space and keep it safe. And so it's a time for me to really sit back as a facilitator and let them unearth their own wisdom. And then often we will then integrate that as part of the ongoing mentorship. Some of my clients can't come to me personally because of geographical distances. And then I have like a whole army of facilitators. Army might be the wrong word, but we are fighting a spiritual war right now. All around the world who I can refer my clients to do the immersion experience while we continue the mentorship. So that is, and that's what excites me the most, is supporting visionaries at this time who really have a new vision of the reality that we can create on this planet, and supporting them to get fully aligned so they can go forward and do the best work that they came here to do. The other thing is the retreats. I'm going to be hosting some retreats with the indigenous elder that I mentioned, Alejandrina Pedro Castaneda, and also a regenerative business systems specialist. So we have a few retreats coming up in Costa Rica this February. And then I'm also working with a clinical psychologist, which I'm very aware still in my left brain that there's parts of my skill sets that are not there. And I think it is amazing to have the therapeutic and integrative container of a psychologist as well, especially for the Western mind around these experiences. And we'll be running some retreats in Costa Rica in June. And I'll also be running a pilgrimage in Mexico with my teacher, I think in June as well. Dates are going to be confirmed the next few weeks. So for people who want to come into rural Mexico and sit and be with indigenous elders and experience the land and have a truly unique experience and work with the mushrooms, you're very welcome to come and join.
That sounds wonderful. Hopefully there are lots of people now clicking on the link that we'll put on here and signing up, because that sounds great. Before we sort of wrap things up, I guess you mentioned a few times, you used words like wisdom and indigenous knowledge. And what sort of realizations have people had when they've worked with this type of medicine? Is there one that you see all the time, or is it unique to the individual?
Thank you. That's a really good question. There's so many common themes that emerge with these medicines. And one is of love as a very powerful force in the world, in our own lives, and empathy and compassion, which is what the Buddhists were getting at too, right? They did that all without plant medicine, but it's what, when we have practices, do they take us to a space of compassion and love for other humans? Because that's really, at the end of the day, what all these religions are supposed to be leading us towards. And sadly, that's not what happens. And so, well, in many cases. And so, yes, it's love and compassion for self. Often, most of us have such strong inner critics. And it's hard for us to even, this is why meditation is so vital, to even just have the space from the voices in our head, which tell us X, Y, or Z about ourselves all the time. And what these medicines do is they allow you to zoom out from the voice in your head and see it objectively and actually go, wow, well, now in this very moment, I'm connected to my heart and I choose a loving voice to speak to myself from. I choose a loving stance to perceive certain dynamics in my life from. And it's just profound, truly profound. And so love comes through, compassion, empathy, beauty. And it's a word that in the psychedelic realms is called noetic, which is something, it's a word that describes something that is indescribable. And this is also combined with the mystical experience. And by definition, it's a state of awe, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Or when you're contemplating whatever it is you're being shown or you're understanding inside. But at the end of the day, it's undefinable. It is the great mystery, mystical. And so it's these awe states that are engendered that allow, because I think as Westerners, it's like we feel we understand everything. And so it's like, well, that's that, and that's that, and that's that. But when you zoom out and experience awe and awe at the mystery, it's it really opens you up after your experience to curiosity again, to a childlike state of being where you're like, wow, I get to go away and like experience mundane things again, but in a completely new way. And that's a very common recurrence. Yeah.
Like that. So you sort of disassociate from the day-to-day critic and see yourself, I guess, in a different way. Be open to some of those other emotions and feelings that you mentioned. And you said something really interesting. I've thought this for a very, very long time. I find it amazing that the word awesome has become as ubiquitous as it is. And the people, you'll be eating a hot dog or something and, oh, that's awesome. Well, is it? It's not. Like, awesome is not a hot dog. Like, it's not an everyday occurrence. And yet the word is used all of the time. So I think the true meaning is lost.
So true. So true. I never thought that. And it's a word I use a lot. I just love it. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm a very like excitable human with lots of passion and, it's like, that's awesome. No, that's good. Thank you for adding that in.
A little thought that's been going around in my head for a few years. I think, and it literally was when I heard someone describe a hot dog as awesome. It was years ago. And ever since then I thought that hot dog wasn't awesome. Like, it just wasn't. Not true sense.
The main way that people experience awe in the day-to-day is through orgasm or epic nature, I would say. That's where people truly are just like, wow. You can like climb up to the top of a mountain and look at a view and just be like, and I think that's often what psychedelics bring us back to is like deep reverence for nature, for the sexual act, for these intimate moments where we're communing with other beings or with nature, the world, and our interconnectedness to both of those things. And so there are ways for the average human who's 9 to 5 stuck in stuck in that way of being to go and experience all.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I love doing is climbing mountains and pushing myself physically in those sorts of locations. And it is that feeling to get to the top, and where so few people have ever been, and see the whole majestic environment from that vantage point is incredible, and is awe-inspiring. And I agree that everyone can push themselves within their own confines, I guess, to experience things like that, whether it's walking in the Lake District or in the jungle in Mexico or wherever you might live. Great point. I love that. Well, I feel like we could just talk forever, but at some point we should probably end. But I've loved that conversation. Is there any one thing that you want to leave the listeners or the viewers with? Any one pearl of wisdom from an alchemist?
It's hope. That's what came through very strongly when you just asked. There is always hope. And I think when we can become so ingrained in our behaviors, our habits, our patterns, it can be really hard to imagine that anything else is possible. And we're seeing it now with humanity. It's like, really, is anything else possible from the situation we're currently in? And the answer is always yes. Like, it's always possible for you, for the world. And it's just, my wish is just not to forget that, and to know it's true. You can change. We can change.
Love it. Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure. Have a wonderful day, and I'll speak to you very soon. Bye.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.